Welcome, Heartache Connoisseur listeners. This is your host, Marty Carpenter, with a very special dignitary VIP guest with us today, Shelly Carpenter. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
I thought it was about time we introduced you to the crowd.
It's an honor.
Well, I don't know about that.
The infamous THC.
Just a country psychiatrist out here in flyover country doing the Lord's work. Well, we're going to talk today about whatever Shelly wants to. This was she's got a few questions for me, and she wants me on record. Is that right?
Be very careful what you say.
Exactly, I will.
It can and will be used against you or for you.
I will edit. Well, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I do this right, I'll be a little payoff later.
Perhaps.
All right. Well, that's as risque as we're going to get. Basically, Shelly and I, we've been married since December. This is our second marriage for both of us. We're doing good. I'm really in love with you. This is a great marriage.
I'm in love with you too. It's lovely to like my spouse.
Well, I think I like you too. Thank you for saying that. I think we're at a place where we have pretty reasonable expectations about what marriage can look like, which seemingly, when you have reasonable expectations for your partner, it exceeds your expectations somehow. That's sort of the paradox of that, right? When you stop striving for the other person to be molded and shaped in your image.
And you own your own shit.
Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. How about that? Bleep. You get an edge there, don't you? Look at you.
A little bit.
It's
not like you don't swear on this.
No, that's true.
Is this PG-13?
You're making me nervous, okay?
Okay.
This is family friendly.
Sorry.
Not really. I wouldn't let my kids listen to it. Actually, I'd make them listen to it. That's what I would do.
Do you need to re-say it so you can edit it?
No.
Okay.
It's fine. It's fine. So what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish here today, Shelly?
I want to talk to you about what it's like to be a psychiatrist.
Okay.
I think we want to get inside your head and your experience for once. We're going to turn the tables.
Like I don't show you what's in my head all the time?
Well, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. But the audience doesn't.
Maybe so. I don't know what you're going to ask me, so you might get something out of me that I don't normally put out there. So
yeah, we're going to turn the tables a little bit and get curious. And we both have a background in mental health.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you did many years of school, child psychology at the master's level, and you work as a life coach and a yoga teacher extraordinaire,
yes.
And we work together sometimes. So you're no stranger to the concepts we talk about on this show at all.
No, but I think it's interesting to really delve deeply into what you experience every day, and your content for your podcast comes a lot from your interactions with patients and deep places within you of experience. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of share that with the audience.
Yeah, the patients definitely have been a proving ground for me in a training situation for sure, in terms of teaching me life lessons. So yeah, that's true.
So let's roll with that.
Okay.
Like
go.
what has being a psychiatrist taught you?
It's taught me about myself. But I think what it's taught me mostly how to do, that's made me like my life more, is to really just accept people in general, how they are, wherever they're from, because I see all genders, all sexual orientations, all race and ethnicity and religion and IQ level and occupational level and financial success, and it's really given me a broad understanding of the human condition, and I think that's made me a much more tolerant and open-minded person. And so I don't nearly as much as I used to I don't spend much time being mad at people groups anymore, if I ever did. But yeah, there's probably a time earlier in my life where I identified more specifically with various groups, political and otherwise, which I just don't now because I've seen too many examples from all over the place and have come to care about them. So that's probably...
So you kind of see categorizations or labels as a oversimplification of the human condition.
Oh, yeah, very much so. It's oversimplification, it's protection, it to some degree is necessary for shorthand communication. And it's just that they can be used, but they have to be used with extreme caution by people who have compassion for the group that they're using the term to describe. If you don't have that, you have no business using the term.
So what has psychiatry taught you about the human condition?
Well, pretty much the commonalities, I would say. A lot of what I do, I've joked and I've said that psychiatry is like poor man's dermatology. And what I mean by that is that the dermatologists diagnose quickly because all they have to do is look at the skin. And to some degree, after you do psychiatry a while, you do something similar to that in that you're able to kind of put together people's tendencies and their stories pretty quickly based on just a small amount of information. And so that has taught me that I wouldn't be able to do that if we weren't the same in a lot of ways. Even if their situation seems different than mine on paper, like the details of the story, the people involved, the situations, it's really the same exact thing played out with different characters, different situations. So I see my own journey in everybody's story to some degree. Yeah, human suffering is part of the deal. There's no way around that. And to some degree, that's a good portion of what drives people crazy. And I do find myself regularly saying to people, you have to accept suffering as part of the preconditions to the human existence. And our denial of that and our multiple attempts to avoid and repress that is to a large degree what leads to a lot of our difficulties. So,
but that's hard. People don't want to hear suffering is just part of life.
No, they want to hear, give me a pill,
right?
And I'll see you in a month and it'll all be better.
Quick fix.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Junior has a drinking problem. Daddy's got a gambling problem. Mommy's got a shopping problem. Big sister is nowhere to be found. And you know what I mean? It's there's no way to unravel the circumstances of life with the tools that I have. And so that's another thing that my work has really taught me is that I have very little to no control over what anybody does. So when I started out in this business, I used to go to great lengths to try to ensure that people would comply with whatever recommendations that I gave them, either in the form of extensive coaching and follow-up and prying, and I don't know what else. Part of it was just an internal posture of, oh my gosh, what if they don't do what I said? You know, what is that gonna? What bad's gonna happen? Does that make me
look like a failure?
Yeah, and it comes to some degree from a lack of confidence about what you're doing too, and who you are and what you have to offer. But for the most part, people do whatever the hell they want, and only occasionally do people follow my directions to a T, and that's only when they're Amish. Literally.
But you had a large group come in the other day.
I do. I see a lot of Amish people, and they are, like, from a perfect patient standpoint, they take the cake. I mean, they are. In
what way?
Well, they're on time. They pay cash, and they do exactly what you tell them.
They're compliant.
And they only come in when they really need to be there.
Yeah.
Because they're paying cash, for one thing, and they've got work to do. They got gardens to tend and pies to make and everything else. Right. But I love the Amish. They're great. They're super fun. It was actually sort of a threshold for me to get over the weirdness of being around Amish people, because they come in groups.
Oh, yeah. I saw the other day. It was
big ones.
It was like the clown car.
Yeah.
Where
that's
clowns
true.
Keep coming out. You're like, could there be more in there? There was.
I yell one name out to the waiting room and 8 people stand up.
Yeah.
And they come back, and I don't even have enough chairs for all of them. And sometimes they stand around. But it used to intimidate me. But I realized at some point that they were all back to this, like, we're all the same. We're all the same. Just because they're in suspenders and drive a buggy doesn't mean
have different values or practices of living than us. Exactly.
So I mean, they have their set of kind of rules that they live by in the way that they see the world and all that, and so do we. You know, that's not different. and they have the same types of afflictions that we have. But I don't want to make this all about Amish people. But it is a good case study, though, of a people group that I did not at first know exactly what to do with or how to relate to, and was kind of tiptoeing around the idea that or around the fact that they were Amish. And am I supposed to like say anything about this? Like, I would find myself, well, in our culture, we would do this. Is that okay with you? Like, is that...
Trying to be sensitive.
Yeah, like kind of just the elephant in the room. But after a while, I figured out, you can just joke with them, and...
they're just people.
Oh, yeah. No, in fact, they're some of the best jokesters of all. They sort of get it, So
do you think being a psychiatrist has helped you move past labels and preconceptions to just truly see people as people?
I would say that's a pretty good summation. I would like to think. Now, I realize fully that I still have all kinds of biases and prejudices and superstitions and everything else that drives a good portion of my behavior, and that I'm definitely on a journey toward becoming ever more full of acceptance and grace for my fellow human beings. But it's hard for me now to watch the news, for example. It's very difficult for me to stay up to date with things, because so much of what I see in the media is heavily driven by fear and prejudice and people. This is from both sides of the aisle. It's really difficult to watch after a while, because on one hand, I have a lot of compassion for what everybody is saying, but I also have a lot of compassion for the people that are unfairly judged and labeled and such, and so I just kind of stay out of all that.
It often creates lines.
They're artificial.
Yeah,
and that just doesn't need to be that way, but that's what we do. So
I want to go back to something you said earlier about how a lot of the times, you can consult with patients, make recommendations, but a lot of times they aren't necessarily following through. Would you say that's one of the most challenging aspects of being a psychiatrist?
Oh, no, not really. I mean,
what is the most challenging aspect of being a psychiatrist?
Well, let's see. What is? I think for me personally, it is that probably that I'm sort of an introvert, and I'm in a position where I'm interacting all day. And so my natural tendency is to kind of want to sit quietly, but I find myself at the end of the day often very fatigued by all of the communications that I've just engaged in, especially because they're heavy. Now, heavy emotionally. Now, over time, you kind of get used to swimming in those waters, and it's not nearly as taxing maybe as people might imagine it to be, but it is still taxing. You're still dealing with pain, one person right after the other. But also the introversion thing comes back and pays dividends in the form of making me sort of a good listener.
Yeah, I was going to say that. What's the pros of being an introverted psychiatrist?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think by nature, introverts tend to be a little bit more self-reflective and I don't know, they look inward. Introvert, they look inward at the inner life, which is what I'm trying to get people to do, is to look inward and report to me what's happening in there. I'm a fellow explorer.
Facilitator?
Yeah, I'm sort of walking side by side with people, but I'm the one with the flashlight kind of pointing out or attempting to point out what's significant.
When you see healing occur, what's happening? What does that look like in a patient?
The humbling truth is that it would oftentimes happen whether I was involved or not, because it's people that are ready. Healing happens when people are genuinely ready.
So readiness is a prerequisite.
I think so. And usually that's because they've been through enough pain or they're threatened with enough loss or something like that, that they really have to take whatever's bothering them seriously, or there's going to be, or there already has been serious consequences. So that's a big motivator for folks. The medication piece is really helpful for certain types of suffering. So there's certain conditions that people come in with that are very brain driven and
neurochemical.
Right. Sure. And these are all false distinctions, but just for the sake of this discussion, you might think of brain driven conditions versus existential and soul driven. That's the way it looks from the chair. Now, modern medicine would not really make that distinction,
Right.
and they would
It's
say
not
that
a duality.
Yeah, they would say that it's all brain, and that anything we call ephemeral, ethereal, spiritual, or otherwise is produced by chemicals in the brain. So it's all chemical.
Or you could go the other way.
You could. You sure could. You sure could go the other way. And so I kind of have to walk between those two worlds. And I think that's part of what does, though, bring help to people, is because people's experience is not brain chemistry. They don't wake up and go, boy, I think my dopamine's a little off today.
Right. No one said that ever.
Yeah, they don't say that. They get up and go, I don't want to face the world, and I'm not sure if life's worth living. Now, that might have a correlation with the dopamine, but it also has a correlation with their whole life journey and the trajectory of their soul and the unraveling of their childhood wounds and all of their hopes and dreams. Like, if you just ignore all that and make it about Wellbutrin, then I just think people are going to have a really empty experience of you as a doctor. And I also don't think they're going to get as well, even if we both like if you're a purely biological psychiatrist with no credence given to the soul piece, I think you run the risk of undertreating, because it's so much about being known and heard.
So it's a holistic approach.
I guess.
I mean, holistic is perhaps the wrong term. That can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But you're expanding the scope to see beyond just the medication. You're seeing the whole person in context of the rest of their life, and not just their bodies, their biochemistry, but their emotions, their hearts, their souls.
I hope so. Because that is what has worked for me, is to understand myself in that way. And it's also in accordance with what I consider to be my worldview in the form of my faith and what I believe about the nature of the universe. And so I don't know how to do it any other way. And I really don't know how to separate out. I mean, I sort of can. If I need to, I can go into, straight biologically trained Western medicine psychiatrist in a heartbeat. I can do that. But what I really like to do is work with people, and I think I tend to attract people who want to do the therapy side of things as well as the med side of things, and kind of embrace those at the same time. And that's really where the richness comes as a clinician too, is when you can kind of integrate those two things. For me,
is that when you see healing occur? When it's
I think you're more
whole approach.
I mean, this is my gestalt is that yes, in fact, that is a more effective modality of treatment. This is one of those things that's very difficult to study. It's kind of like asking, well, who are the good doctors and who are the bad doctors and why? I'd like to think if there's anything about me that is effective, that it is that I hold the tensions, that the tension of this is biochemical and psycho-spiritual at the same time. And it's the integration of those two and the acceptance. What young clinicians do is the exact same things we do in society. We judge a group. And so what they'll say is, well, I identify more with the biological side of things, therefore therapy is pointless. Or I'm a therapist, therefore people who make it all about the meds are small-minded and short-sighted. And so everybody just chooses sides.
There's an art and a balanced union.
Yeah. Oh, this is definitely a field where experience makes a huge, huge difference. And I'm still relatively young, and I have a long way to go. But there's something about reps with people that changes you too as a physician, for sure. You don't just come out of medical school knowing the answers. What you come out is thinking you know the answers, and then find out you know almost nothing. Yeah.
Which after that many years of school must be pretty humbling.
All the school is really doing is training your subconscious mind and teaching you how to learn and finding out if you're a person that can absorb the equivalent of 10,000 calories worth of information a day for 4 years straight.
Right. It's a lot.
That's pretty much what it is. And then you just join the workforce. I think I'm just like a tradesperson. I'm really just a highly trained tradesperson, because what I do requires a license, just like it would require to do electrician work or something. So it's kind of, I think of it to some degree the same.
Mm-hmm.
So
where's the art in psychiatry?
the art piece,
Mm-hmm.
That's in the little things. It's the subtle things, and it's probably a lot of the things. The people who really have the art down probably don't even know they're doing it. It's when to not do things. It's when to not prescribe a drug. It's knowing that. It's when they're walking out the door, it's when to touch a shoulder and tell them it's going to be all right, It's when to, the timing of smiles, the timing of questions, knowing the dose of information you're giving somebody or how far to push them in a moment or not, being patient. That's those kinds of things where you're really letting people have their experience, even though you kind of can see 5 or 6 dots down the road. They just need to sit. They need to sit here right now, and that's okay.
I think there's an art to being present with people's suffering.
Well, yeah, probably there is that too, where you're not making people feel uncomfortable for having it, where you really, like I said earlier, like you're creating a space where, it is okay to cry. It is okay for, I've treated people who played Division I and professional athletics and sat there and made a space for them to cry, that kind of thing.
For some people, it's like that's life transforming in itself to have a person where it's safe to do that.
Yeah, I think that's true. It really can sometimes break things wide open, even a simple experience. I'm really humbled sometimes when I think about all of the thousands upon thousands of people that come through our office and how that has ripples out into the community. That's really, really satisfying. We were at Allie's, your daughter, my stepdaughter, at her band concert not long ago, and we were in a big auditorium at a local high school, and I looked around and I saw lots of patients that were in the room and lots of people that I'd seen in the waiting room, and I thought, wow, we're making an impact here, because a lot of these people, they feel good enough to come and listen to all these out-of-tune violins.
Right. It's like only those that really love those people are in that audience.
Yeah. But it's important for doctors to know this, and really anybody in the helping, any profession at all. I mean, the ripples that we have when we're simply kind and available and open, and it's a big deal. And that's what makes the world, that's the only thing really that makes the world a better place, is just kind of dealing with people in a loving fashion, one at a time, as far as I can tell, or at least that's what my contribution has become, I hope.
Absolutely. Huge ripples. And also affirming that mental health issues are a lot more common than people think.
Oh, yeah. No, it's huge. Yeah.
We have no idea how much our bubbly, smiling next door neighbor might really be hurting deep inside.
Yeah. Well, Anthony Bourdain.
Right. We were just watching him last night, and we were commenting on.
Yeah.
Commented.
We were watching an episode of whatever his show's called, Anthony Bourdain's travel, cooking, eating show. And it just occurred to me, I was looking at him, and I thought, man, that dude looks sad to me.
He looked forlorn.
He just looked really depressed. And it was the next day, I turned on my phone, and I went to Facebook, and there was this,
suicide.
He had committed suicide. And then you have like Kate Spade, the designer. And so, I mean, it's trite and everybody kind of knows this, sort of, or they'll say they do. But the truth is, what this world has to offer in the form of accomplishment, money, success, prestige, does absolutely nothing at all.
Right. It's not a guarantee to
it does
happiness.
Nothing. And
or
so
fulfillment.
It just, it does nothing for fulfillment. It does what it does, which it gives you material success. That's right. But that's just one variable in a very, very large equation we call happiness, health, wellness, etc. I mean, this is a hurting, broken, banged up world far beyond what people even know. Because, I mean, that's the other thing that my work has taught me, is that there are a lot of secrets behind the four walls of our homes. There are definitely some homes that function well and are pretty healthy, but a lot of them, that appear healthy are in fact not, and that there's a lot of pain in people that present well and go to very professional, high-paying jobs and are very visible in their community. There's just a lot of pain.
Yeah.
A lot of pain everywhere.
Well, one of the reasons I fell in love with you is because you have such a big, loving heart. You just love people.
Well, he may not
And
be
you
tall, but
feel-
he's got a big heart, people.
He's got a huge heart, which says a lot.
Well,
And it's good for spooning.
that's true. Yeah, no, we're sort of, that is true. Like from a body standpoint, we're about right for the spoon.
Right.
It works pretty
It's
well.
a good puzzle.
You see those couples that like he's 6'8" and she's 4'9".
Right,
You're like,
you
how
just-
does that?
Yeah.
This is like a Chihuahua and a Saint Bernard.
Yep. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, but
But my point is like, you deal with human pain. You have got a huge heart. You feel. How do you cope with that? How do you, I mean, you deal with really heavy topics. You deal with people who are in desperation, who are super low, who are sometimes on the brink of suicide, and that's heavy.
yeah.
How do you cope with that?
Well, that's been a transition. That's been a process. I think early on, when I was in my 20s and early 30s and training and earlier in my career, that I had far more defenses up in the form of cynicism and anger and lack of patience with people. And it's not that I'm like angry at them or like in the moment. Maybe I was, I don't know, but I'm not. It's not like I'm yelling at people, but I was just hardened. I just was kind of walled off and wouldn't really let myself go there totally with people. And as I grew as a person, I began to let some of that in. I even remember times where I'd get some particularly painful news from somebody, maybe a family member they'd found dead or suicided or something, and where I'm breaking down and starting to cry with patients. And now I just kind of let myself do that a little bit from time to time, whereas before I would have thought it was inappropriate somehow. So I think there's kind of like the way I've described it is that I have maybe a set of blinds between me and the patient, and I can kind of tilt those to let as much of a connection flow through there as is necessary to be appropriate to create a healing connection, hopefully, but not so much as to leave me completely disabled by the encounter too. Although some have. I mean, there are times where I interact with somebody and I just have to take a time out, but that's a learned skill, and I think it's true for EMTs and police and firefighters and nurses and ER workers and everything. It's not unique to us. The other thing that happened too is that what seems like a tragedy to them isn't always such a tragedy in the end. And so I kind of know that, and I've seen enough different stories unfold to where when somebody's telling me this horrible, terrible, awful thing, I know that a lot of the times that's all going to be okay, especially relational conflict. It's not when their kid has cancer. Okay, that's not
right.
That's not
that's
ever
hard to see any.
But people have a lot of quote unquote tragedies in the form of job loss and bankruptcies and divorce, and those things tend to work out over time. And so you just have to be patient and empathize with them where they're at. So
What do you do? What practices do you engage in for your own emotional, mental health, and spiritual health?
I definitely spend a lot of time getting and staying what I might call centered. And what I mean by that is where my own mental chatter is down about as low as I know how to get it, so that I can just be really clean when I go in and not thinking about a whole bunch of other things. And so I do that in the form of mostly, I meditate / pray a lot. I read things that are uplifting and wise, and try to fill my head only with that which makes me better that way. I really try not to engage in things that are about violence and hatred and bloodshed and judgment and calamity in the form of various forms of media. And so I just try to stay mentally balanced that way. And
very intentional.
Yeah. And certainly exercise has been part of my life more to a greater and lesser degree, depending on what season of life it's been. I've experimented with yoga with you some, and that is effective and highly recommended should anyone want to engage in that behavior. So that does work too, but you just have to have a regimen. I talked to the residents at the University of Iowa not long ago, and I was like, look, guys, figure out how to take care of yourselves, because about half y'all are getting divorced, and
it's a tough road.
You're going to be talking to your patients and who are going through their own divorces while you go through yours, and if you don't have a good way to stay centered, and it's just a tough road. And I think medicine's really dropped the ball on preparing people emotionally for what they're about to do. It's kind of got a little bit of a military holdover kind of, if you're not tough enough to do this, you shouldn't be doing it. So suck it up, buttercup kind of a thing, you know. What
do you think should be included in training?
Oh, just self-care for one thing. I mean, certainly sensitivity training. I mean, you'd be appalled to know the degree to which doctors judge their patients. I mean, they really do. They really do a lot of the time, and go in the back room and run them down. But really, though, what that is it's not that they're judging the patients as much as that they're frustrated that they don't have all the answers, and the patients are putting them in situations where they feel less powerful than they like, and so that's hard, and so then they blame the patient. But
they feel like they don't know, and they should know.
But see, it took me a long time to figure that out, and nobody ever told me that. Even if they had told me that, I'm not sure I would have understood it until I'd figured it out on my own. But I think there's definitely room to train doctors about the emotional experience and emotional health, because it's humongous, and there's a lot of there's a lot of people in power who aren't very emotionally healthy. So if they're the people who are making decisions about what to train people are themselves relatively unhealthy emotionally, then it's not going to happen. That's going to be
a priority.
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
How about when medication doesn't work for a patient?
Well, that's just another turn in the road. That's just another twist in the turn you deal with. And sometimes that's actually helpful, because
that's interesting. Tell us more about that.
Well, let's say that I'm talking to a person who really needs to make some changes in their life about their lifestyle maybe, and how they're living, and decisions they're making, and maybe substances they're using, or relationships they're engaging in, or whatever, or even maybe a job that's really wrong for them, for instance. Not just, like substance abuse, but maybe somebody's just in a job with a supervisor that's really malignant or whatever, and they want a pill to fix it, and the pills aren't working. And so that pushes them to then make decisions that will ultimately be the cure that they really need. But they kind of need to try that before they're willing to maybe make take more definitive steps. For instance, that would be an example. So
there's learning and failure of some treatment modality.
I mean, pills are just a supplement to wellness. I often will try to explain it like, if feeling as good as you can, or feeling optimal for whatever. I'm not even going to say the word good. Feeling optimal, because happiness is BS, but feeling the way that humans were meant to feel, I mean, not even going to say meant to feel, because I think we were meant to feel quite a bit of joy and bliss, but doing really well on planet Earth, okay? That's a pie, and pills are like a piece of that pie, and so is taking care of your spiritual health and your physical health and your relational health and even your finances and your parent-child relations and all these things. So they all play into that wellness thing that we're all looking for. And so I'm totally aware that pills are not the whole pie. Now, they're a bigger piece of pie for some disorders than they are others. But if you go in knowing that you're not going to always, or rarely even, fix something with a medicine, then you're much better off. If everybody's got reasonable expectations. A lot of what I do is set expectations with people about how the treatment process is likely to go, and that's really an effective way to start.
That's true. I really find it refreshing, because that's exactly what my perspective is as a wellness coach. Is it's like you have this pie, and wellness is composed of all the different pieces. So that's your perspective. How prevalent is that perspective in psychiatry in general, do you think?
Oh, I think...
Are the tides turning?
Sort of. I mean, I definitely think alternative medicine has gained a lot of steam in society these days, and that's probably a good thing in many ways, because it does make people much more open to the concept of maintenance in their wellness, which is really important. But mostly mental health providers, I think people who are drawn to mental health probably are a little bit more naturally open, generally speaking, to the concept that we just talked about there with the pie. There are certain other medical specialties that are a bit more, I don't know. That's not fair. I don't know. It's really a pretty individual thing. But there definitely is, within Western medicine, structural institutional bias against the wellness model, for sure. And it's in our insurance reimbursement system.
Absolutely.
Like, that's a big problem.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll pay for big, huge bottles of pain pills, but we
Right.
won't pay for you to get, something that will really help you maintain and get through your
Right.
chronic pain, like, say, private yoga sessions or something
Right.
like that.
Or they won't pay for wellness coaching to make
Wellness
changes
coaching,
that
right.
might help people lose weight, get
Yeah.
off their insulin. How has being a psychiatrist affected your soul?
Oh. Well, it's definitely helped me in my relationship or my pursuit of God, because it has put me in many positions where the only good option I thought I had was prayer. I mean, it's just it's ugly out there. And there's a lot of really, 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 I mean, I'm talking about hurting average normal people, but then there's this whole other layer of mental illness that, like, you can't even function in society, and, schizophrenia that's severe, and group homes, and violent psychotic crime, and innocent by reason of insanity, and that whole thing, But it has caused me to really, I mean, truly, it's just humility. I nobody that's really humble ever says I'm humble, and I'm not. I'm so full of pride, way too much, a lot of the time. But I am so much more aware that what this is about is not what it looks like. This is not about, it's not the Marty show. It's not the big, awesome doctor that knows all the answers and makes all this money and has all this. That's not it.
What is it about?
Well, it's I'm a servant. There's somebody else in charge, and my job fundamentally is to love his sheep. Like, whoever my flock happens to be, that's my job. And I do that knowing that those lives that I'm involved with are precious to the King, as is mine. But those are his children, and it's a privilege and for me to get to interact with them at all, and that he would entrust me with their well-being is it's really meaningful to me, because I get to hear people's pain in such intimate ways, and they give me so much trust just because of my title and more than I deserve, and they give me, I think, far more than I give them. I really do believe that. But so I really do see myself as an agent of the kingdom of God, in a way, in that I'm here to try to help alleviate human suffering and point people, not so much directly, but point people towards the healing that is available from God. And that's not that I preach a sermon in the office, but it's that I see the tools that I have in my disposal as mercies from God for the patients. So
it's a way of demonstrating his love on earth.
I believe that's true. That's the only thing that keeps me getting up out of bed every morning. If it wasn't for some higher purpose like that, it would get really old really fast.
Yeah, so it gives it meaning.
it gives it meaning. I mean, if these were just human animals that had no value to anything and anybody, and we're just going to end up in a hole of dirt, rotting corpses with no souls and forgotten forever, what a pointless exercise this is all would all be for all of us.
Right. Like, what's the point?
I mean, yeah, what is the point if it's just that? And I know that there's like a lot of atheistic, humanistic nihilists who would give me reasons why I'm wrong. But for me, what motivates me is that the people that I'm interacting with, including my employees too, by the way, are infinitely valuable. They are loved. They are treasures. They are, and their families and treasure them too. And they need to be well to be parents and workers and contributors to society. So yeah, that's what makes it a joy and an honor to do. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So that begs the question, do you feel mental health and spirituality, can they be separated? I'm asking like
for
a
me,
loaded
to
question
me,
here.
Obviously the answer would be no. I mean, I can pretend, but it's not what I really believe. And I think what I often too observe is that even people who say they're atheistic, humanistic, nihilistic scientists, behave in ways toward their patients that are very holy and sacred. And so it's kind of like, well, what do you believe? Do you believe what you say you believe, or do you believe what you do?
Right.
If you treat this person with dignity and respect, and you give them advice that's good for their soul, and tell them to take care of their own soul and their spirit, and treat them, with a depth of humanity that's unprecedented, and you say you don't believe in anything, then I don't really believe you. I just think you haven't gotten clear about what you believe. That's what I think when I observe my colleagues that think like that, or pronounce that they think like that. To me, though, like all of the things that the forefathers of psychiatry were looking into, people like Jung and Freud. And I'm not an expert. Look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I understand those guys as well as some of the old school psychiatrists that trained me. But what it appears to me is that they were all on the search to understand the human soul. And that today we do that in the form of neuroscience. But really, to me, it just gets ever more interesting, because it's like, if it's true, if the divine is all true, then it's all one thing, of course.
Right. It's like,
the
God
science
created this. And I feel.
Yeah. The science is going to support what we know to be true about the soul and the divine. And that's typically what happens, actually. I mean, it's pretty rare that you have a scientific discovery that goes against what I would call good theology. I mean, they tend not to run in opposition to each other ever. And really that whole battle, that whole science and religion battle, to me, is silly and doesn't. It's a false that's straw man. I mean, I don't think it's real. I think it's people with pride who are taking positions and getting all entrenched about it. And really, science is about what science professes to be about is not knowing and asking questions from a neutral perspective, and wherever the answers lead is what we go with. That's and they really would, a hypothesis is a non-judgmental state. It's just a question about the nature of reality. Right. And really that's to some degree what I would call high-level theological thinkers are doing too. They're really just responding to the nature of reality that they're able to perceive, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of, in a way, the same pursuit. And if both parties involved here, if the scientific-minded folks and the religious-minded folks all had a depth of awareness about what they don't know, then none of these debates would ever happen, because we don't know what we don't know.
Agree.
Way, way more we don't know than we know, for sure.
Humility, that's the key.
Humility's the key, and it tastes good. We talked about the humble pie.
Right.
And, humble pie is where it's at, baby. I mean, because you're so much more free when you're humble, because you basically don't have your reputation riding on everything all the time. You just get to kind of chill out and have a good time.
Well, and it's not about your ego. It's about being of service.
Right. And that's good, by the way. That sounds like, service. That sounds boring, like volunteering at the food pantry or something. It's like, no, service is the best thing of all. That's like where all of the depth is.
Well, it's where you have meaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's meaning,
purpose, and meaning. But lots of things can be. I want to be very careful, because I really think working in a corporation can be service oriented too.
Oh, right.
Or any of the trades or education or whatever. There's a million ways to serve the people around you and find purpose and meaning in your work every day. But you have to feel valuable yourself.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have an awareness that you are valuable, this is one of the great attractive pieces of religion, of Jesus. I don't know, religion, whatever. But Jesus in particular is that it's clear that he values creation, and you can't treat others with as much value as they have unless you are in touch with your own value. You just can't do it. And,
and if you realize that your value in no way takes away from somebody else's value, because we're all under the body of Christ.
It's not a competition,
right?
Anything and everything that we are was somebody else's decision,
right?
Now, sort of. We obviously have a free will to better ourselves and everything, but you didn't get to pick. You didn't get to pick your genetics. You didn't get to pick your parents. You didn't get to pick your society, your country, your culture, whatever. And so we have to be really humble. If you're born into a $1 billion fortune or born dirt poor in the streets of India, you're just as valuable to the king. And that's super, super important to understand.
And you don't have to earn it.
Can't.
That's the other thing.
You can't.
That's the other thing.
It's counterproductive. The harder you try, the more the world just keeps smacking you in the face.
Do you think that's where a lot of today's anxiety and depression come from?
Oh,
is
absolutely.
A misguided understanding of that concept?
Yeah, we're all trying to earn our way there to some degree. And that creates the drive that keeps people moving and competing and jockeying for position and social strata and hierarchy and dominance and all this. That's kind of it. The fall, the garden, I go back to that Garden of Eden story all the time in my mind as a way to kind of understand.
In your speech.
Well, and do I talk about it a lot, honey? I'm going to be 95. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the Garden of Eden, but anyway, the whole idea. I see this in people, myself included. But the whole point of that was that we were trying to be like God. That was our sin. That we were attempting to know things and seek accolades. That weren't rightfully ours as a result of that particular decision to attempt to be like God and have the knowledge that God has. And so that's gotten us in a world of trouble, metaphor. And believe me, I'm not here to tell you that I necessarily think, first of all, I don't know if there was a literal Adam and Eve, and that's not the point. To me, what's important is the metaphor that the main mistake that we all make is we attempt to find out things that are none of our business in the form of
we want control.
We want a crystal ball. We want control. We want to dictate the outcome of events. We want to make it go the way we want it, and when it doesn't, we have a tantrum.
Right.
We're petulant little children. We're if we really were gods, we'd be, nuking societies all the time.
Well, we're very self-important.
So we're super self-important, and there's so much freedom, back to this whole humility thing, in just kind of admitting you're not and taking your place as a created entity versus attempting to be a deity.
And a piece. You don't have to, it's like all of a sudden you're trying to juggle so many different things, and you can just let your arms down, relax, kind of rest.
I really think that's true. I think that everybody deep down, from the rich to the poor, from the theologian to the scientist, that everybody's looking for the same thing. I really do think so. I think everybody's looking for the same thing, which is peace, meaning, and purpose. Like that. That's kind of the thing we want. We want to feel like our lives matter, and we we don't want to suffer. We want to find a place of peace, and some people believe you do that through technology, and some people believe you do that on your knees praying, and some people believe you do that by buying it, or looking pretty or handsome or whatever. But the truth is, we don't have a lot of power to make any of our dreams come true. But what we have the power to do is submit to a process that's kind and good if we let it be.
What emotional health is required to get to that point?
That's a good question. How healthy to get to what point? To peace?
To get to the point where you're like, I surrender.
Oh, well, anybody can do that. It doesn't matter how smart you are or old you are or anything. I mean, you can always...
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what emotional health-wise facilitates that.
Well, back to the whole concept of pain. I mean, I think great pain and great love are the two that one of my favorite authors, Richard Rohr, talks about as the big transformers in life. But in my business, I tend to see the pain side of things for sure. But that's usually followed by love if people are paying any attention. But it requires a depth of brokenness. It requires a dark night of the soul for you to submit. I mean, why would you submit before then? Right.
I mean, what's in it? Why?
If you still have options yourself, you're going to keep exploiting those. I mean, everybody's so. I think of it like in the old rock bottom AA analogy. You know, well, when are they going to hit rock bottom? Well, death is rock bottom. You
can't get much lower than that.
You can get off.
Well, I guess you can.
So
depending on your spiritual.
Think of it like this: we're all born onto this elevator that's falling, and you can step off anytime you want, and you don't have to ride it all the way down to a crash. And that's and so this whole idea of rock bottom. I mean, rock bottom is whenever you want it to be.
Well put. If only people knew that pain was necessary or part of the process. Like, it's the hard part, I imagine, is like when they're in that state, they can't appreciate it.
No, it's true. It feels really unfair. It feels unjust. Mostly what we tend to do is we use it to justify our victim story, and we look for somebody to have pity on us and agree with us. Blame. But I think really what's happening is that God in his wisdom and his mercy has created a world that operates, I don't know what they call those rings where you try to train a horse to take a saddle where you break them.
Oh, I don't either, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's what it's like down here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really pretty much the good Lord trying to get a saddle on us and trying to get us to stop bucking and kicking long enough for him to strap it on. But you're not really very useful when you're bucking and snorting and kicking, but you get a saddle on a horse and it'll take instruction and it'll, put a bit in its mouth and you can kind of lead it around. That's a useful horse. And but that's also good because that horse gets fed and it gets sheltered and it gets groomed, and it gets cared for, it gets loved, It's not a wild,
it's not turned out into the wild again.
And we think that's somehow cool or something like, well, I'm wild and nobody's going to control me and look at me. And, it's like
all that posture,
all that. Yeah. It said, snorting, and you can just sort of see the horses batting at each other out there and everything. But
that's a good example too from a state of brokenness. They essentially call it like breaking in the horse.
You got to get broke.
Yeah.
You got to get broke. And that's what it looks like to me that this world does to people is it just keeps upping the ante.
Until they kind of become
is one OWI going to do it? Okay, how about 2? How about 3 in a divorce? How about 4 in a divorce and a bankruptcy? How about 5 in a divorce and a bankruptcy and a dead kid? Like, is that going to do it? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know exactly what you're saying.
That's what it looks like. Yeah, I mean, there just is a period of time where people have to experience enough of their own mess that they kind of give up kicking.
And do you see your job as being present, obviously, in that suffering, but also shining a light on what can come from that.
Absolutely. I mean, I meet a lot of people during their crises, because that's ultimately what prompts them to come in a lot of the time. And so a good portion of the time when people come into me, the very first time I meet them, they're in the thick of something really hard. And so what I often tell people is I'll say, look, you got a choice right now. You can become wise and peaceful, or you can become bitter, angry, and alone. And I'm happy to show you how to make choices that lead to wisdom and peace. But you do, make no mistake, have a choice now as to how you're going to respond to what life is delivering up to you. People are going to do what they're going to do, and you kind of have to massage them toward good decisions as they're ready to hear it. You know, you can't come in there like a school teacher and smacking people's fingers with a ruler, and you need to quit doing that. And because the truth is, I really don't know what they need. Maybe they do need that fourth. Maybe that's the only thing. Maybe. Well,
that circles back to the concept of readiness.
And I don't always know exactly when people are ready. And I think sometimes I've pushed people too hard, and I've lost some opportunities with folks. And I'll see the other thing too. I'll see sometimes is that somebody will come in, and we'll work with them for a while, and then they'll be lost to me for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and they'll come back, and you can tell something has really changed. Like, okay, I'm really ready now. I'm really ready to,
sure. They just weren't ready to take advantage of it the first time around. Yeah.
So that is part of the art of psychiatry, is kind of knowing the readiness. And if you one way to know if people are ready is if you know if they're not ready when you feel like you're working harder than they are. If that makes any sense. Yeah. Like, there's a saying in our business, it's like never work harder than your patients. And that's a good gauge. If it feels like they're receptive and open, and you're not having to break your back to try to get through to somebody, then that's a good indicator that they're probably ready.
So I'll maybe end with this little snippet that when I told my mother, this was before we were married, that I was dating a psychiatrist, she said, "Oh, are you sure you want to do that? Isn't he going to be analyzing you all the time?"
Yeah, I should ask you what it's like. I mean, what is it like being married to a psychiatrist?
It's mostly very beneficial. You're very emotionally attuned, and I find that really refreshing. And I like that and love that about you. Sometimes it's also maddening, because you'd be like, I don't think you really feel that way. This is what I think you really feel. And I'm like, damn it, sometimes, yes.
Well, I probably ought to learn how to keep my mouth shut. That's what I probably ought to do.
Sometimes, but you are an excellent reader of people.
Including you.
Most of the time. Most of the time.
I'm reading right now that you're ready for some shrimp.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, let's go cook dinner. Okay. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time.